right.
Bye, Con. How are you?
Good, good. Nice, bright, sunny day out.
Yeah, right. It is. God bless him. And I was walking around. So I just moved, and the property we moved to is really like a blank slate. The guy before me had horses. They like really ate down the grass. So I was walking around with my wife. I'm like, oh my God, we got to start gardening immediately. Like there's a little. I planted a tomato plant this morning. I'm very excited.
Nice.
Yeah, I like growing things. So look, you're running to be a trustee for the Meridian District Library District. My God, I couldn't get that one out. Talk to me about this.
I mean, where do you want to start?
Well, like libraries obviously are a thing,
Right.
that nobody really paid attention to them much going through the teens and like forever. Like, I went to the library as a kid and my kids go to the library. And then they really became a thing that people were worried about and paying more attention to in the last like 5 years to the point where we obviously passed, I believe it's 710, HB 710 last year in 2024, which not only redesigned the review process, because libraries have always had review processes of curriculum, but redesigned it and then had punitive damages if there was a conflict between a patron and the library board and the judge could make a determination. So we have a more robust review system now. And it's my understanding that a couple people have engaged in it, but again, people are paying attention to the library district. And so why run for it?
Well, so the Meridian Library District is kind of a unique creature in the state of Idaho. I think there might be some other library districts that fall into the same category, but it's a standalone library district, right? If you look at the Boise Library, it rolls up under the city and it's managed by the city. The trustees are appointed by the city and so on and so forth. There's other libraries in the state that potentially span several counties, and those are more kind of standalone type entities.
Similar to Meridian is what you're saying. They're standalone.
Right.
Like they have an elected board of trustees. So they function very much like a school district.
Right. So
they have an elected board of school trustees.
So the Meridian Library District is a standalone district that was created, I believe it was 1974. It goes way back when there was nothing here, right? I mean, I've been living in this area since 91. And back in 91, there was nothing out here, right? So Meridian Library District is a standalone district that extracts about $9.6 million from its taxpayers, people who live in the district, which, people go, oh, all right, well, that's an interesting number. But when you compare it to, let's say, the city of Eagle, right next door here, what they extract to run a city to support 33,000 people is, I think, a little under 5 million, right? 4 point something million. Kuna, down on the other end of the valley, they support a population of about 30,000 people. And what they extract from their taxpayers is, less than Eagle extracts, about 4.5 or 4.6, something like that. So you have a library district that has 5 buildings and maybe about 200 employees, tops, that pulls $9.6 million from its taxpayer base. And it's like, okay, why is that? Right.
If I may ask, if we look at population, it seems that the Meridian Library District is a steal compared to the per capita spending of Eagle. So Eagle has like 30, 40,000 people. And if you're looking at $4.5 million, Meridian has like 130,000. So you'd have to 3X that to get to the analogous per person, per capita spending.
Well, this is just the library. I'm not talking about the library in Eagle. I'm talking about the entire city of Eagle. We're talking about fire, police, sewer, water, and whatever else they need to support that community, right?
Well, we have a fire district, right. So they don't do the fire.
Well,
okay.
But they pay for it, right?
You're saying the city budget, the entire city budget,
entire city budget, not just the library.
Okay,
it's the entire city budget. Yeah. So comparatively speaking, you're looking at a library district versus an entire city, right? So it's like, well, why is this library extract almost twice as much from the population base? Now, a part of that is back in 2019 is there was a plant levy election that, that people went and voted for. It was like $14 million over the next 10 years, right? So even if you took the $1.4 million out of that 9.6, well, it still leaves you about 8 point something, right? 8 point, whatever that number is. which is still quite a lot, right?
Sure.
So the question is, well, what are they spending the money on? And that's, part of why I want to run is to get, into the details. Because if you, there's a website called transparent.idaho.gov. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
So if you go to that, supposedly, 5 years ago when they enacted this legislation to create that website, you're supposed to be able to, click on, a government agency and get down to the granularity of, well, how much pizza did they order for this particular month in this particular year, right?
Like every receipt.
Right.
So we could all do our own forensic audit, essentially.
So if you look at libraries or this particular library, well, they only have like the yearly number, right? And it's all bunched up. And it's like, okay, well, let's break that down. Let's figure out. So in order to do that, you have to do a FOIA request. And we've done that in the past, and, they've given us bits and pieces of information, but, the big defense against FOIA requests are, well, it's going to take, this many man hours. So it's going to cost you $300. It's like, well, do I really want to pay that kind of money to get this information? I'm paying taxes, right? This information should be accessible, which is, why there's Transparent Idaho. And if you go on that Transparent Idaho website and you look at the Meridian Library District, there's a page that says salaries, right? Coming soon. It's been coming soon for years now, right? So why haven't they put salaries of individuals who work there? Because it's public info and I pay for it. I don't want to know the name of the person. I just want to know, all right, here's 5 librarians and they all make between this range. So I can kind of sit there and calculate it out. So anyway, there's that transparency issue, right? And then of course,
may I ask, outside of the larger state level website, Transparency Idaho Gov, outside of that, they have to approve a budget in a public meeting annually, right?
Right. Yeah.
So have you attended the budget meeting where they say like, hey, this is our budget and this is what we're going to approve?
Well,
because that seems like a great option for like, hey, if I want to know what the budget is, I can just go to the public meeting.
Oh, they publish the budget, their yearly budget on their website as well. And they may even publish it on a monthly basis, or they track it somehow.
What is the budget on their website say then?
Well, I've got to probably go back to their website to look at that.
Okay.
But I have the 2024 number was, their revenue, their tax revenue.
Yeah.
It's probably about $9.6 million for
No, I know. I get that. What I'm saying is like you had questions about what the money was spent on.
Right.
I presume on the budget that they approve in the public meeting, there is that information that then they're providing on their website. Or is it literally, the whole budget just like, this is how much money
it's the same level of granularity that it's on Transparent Idaho, right? Okay. We had in the year of 2024, I'm just pulling a number out of the air, $800,000 in operating costs. Well, okay, well, what was that, right? I want to get down below that, and I want to get to a monthly level. And to me, that the only way to potentially get to that is, well, I got to run for the board and get on the board, and hopefully I can see that, because I'd like people to know what that is, right? What exactly are they spending money on?
So financial concern. Do you have financial concerns?
I have financial concerns.
You feel like the only way that you can get those questions answered is if you become a trustee.
Exactly.
And so if I wanted, because now I'm really curious actually. So if I wanted to know, I couldn't get this information either unless I became a trustee.
Well, no, you could ask for it. Now, will they give it to you? I don't know. Right? You could do a FOIA request.
Sure.
Public records request. They could slow roll it. They could, give you bits and pieces, or they can say, well, okay.
Or they could just give it to me. Or that could happen as well.
They could give it to you, right? Or they could say, well, we'll give it to you, but it's going to cost you this. So, okay.
Gotcha. Okay. So financial transparency.
And
you don't, at this point, do you know of any, because again, I love financial transparency. Let me be really clear. I also like to know if there's something motivating that I did a bunch of school board interviews a couple of years ago, and one of the gentlemen was very concerned, saying we need a forensic audit. Like literally, we need to go out into the school district and count every single pencil and make sure that check. And I asked him, I was like, well, that's fine. I have no problem. I don't know anything about it, but Do you have any information that you could tell me as just a citizen that it's like, this is why we need the forensic audit, right? So is there, and he actually didn't have any. He's like, no, I don't actually have reason to suspect. I just want to be sure. I'm like, okay. And again, I have no idea about it. So do you have any reason to suspect that there's financial, fraud, waste, or abuse?
Just from a 30,000 foot common sense kind of level where you're comparing the amount of money that a library district pulls in. And I understand they're servicing, what's the population? 130,000 people. Are there 130,000 people going to the library every day? Probably not, right?
Sure. But that's the same for any city.
So you have, 5 buildings, a couple hundred people working, collection of books and all this other stuff they've got going on, right? Like, I don't know if Jeff told you, but they also do, 3D printing.
Oh yeah.
Pretty much for free.
Super cool. I want to take my son down there. Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually gotten stuff printed there.
Nice.
There's large format printing. There's engraving. I think they said they had a podcast studio, which I haven't seen yet. Now they've got an autism sensory room in the new building. And I think there's a few other things that they're doing, but okay. So great. Fantastic. I'd like to see the numbers on that, on these individual items, not just one big blob of operating cost or whatever. And then also, okay, here's personnel expenditures, right?
Sure.
4 or 5 million, whatever. Okay. Well, give me a list of, your positions, how many people you have, what they're getting paid.
Sure. Yeah,
right?
So again, I get that 100%. So just bottom line is you're like, hey, look, no, I don't really have a smoking gun. Yeah. I just want to know.
Yeah,
great.
Exactly.
Understood.
And
100%.
at the end of the day, you may come out, I may come out of this with, oh, I can see why they're extracting this money from the public. Then it's fine, right? So,
well, I'll tell you what, if you do become a trustee, I would love to have you on an annual basis to come in here and do a show explaining this, and we could do like 30 minutes. You're like, hey, look, this is how, or 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, just like how it's broken down. Like I understand your desire to know. Yeah. And it's good to know that you don't have any like smoking gun or big thing, but it's like, hey, I like transparency.
Right.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. Just like all the other folks that come in here and talk to you and say, I love the library. I remember. Yeah. Okay. I do like the library. It's a very useful place. I check out books online and I say, I want it to be delivered to this library so I can go. That's closest to my house. So I can pick it up. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'll stroll in there, grab the book and say, oh, well, let me see what kind of DVDs do they have, right? Oh, well, I haven't seen that yet. Let me watch that again without commercials, right? Because every streaming service has commercials now. And hey, what else is going on? Well, I'm a licensed ham radio operator, right? And there's different projects that I work on that require, oh, well, you could print this thing on 3D. I was like, well, let's see how that works. I send it to them, and several days later, I go in and pay them $1, and bingo, there it is. It's fantastic. But there's a cost to all that, right? And well, how are those services being utilized? How many people are utilizing those services? And, does everybody want this kind of service through the library, right? Maybe it's better off in a different organization, like as part of the city or something like that. So, so just as a comparison, again, also the city of Meridian, their annual taxpayer budget is about 50 million, right? 50 million. And so it's like, wow, the library would be 1/5, or if you kind of added it in, a little less than, it'd be 1/6 of that budget, right? In theory. And you're like, wow, that's a lot. Because what's the biggest budget items for cities, right? Fire, police, sewer, water, and stuff like that.
Well, again, if they don't have their own districts.
Right. But the city of Meridian has its own fire department, has its own Meridian PD. Sure. We have our own water, thankfully, and sewer system. So all that is, provided through the city. You pay for it. So how does that all compare, right? And
yeah, let me ask you something. Is comparing these different numbers, like you were saying, hey, the entire city of Eagles let's say $4.5 million.
Right.
Meridian, $50 million.
Right.
So over 10x. But we also have different like Eagle has a fire district, right? Instead of it being covered by, and they do have a contract-based police department instead of, So we have different things.
Sure.
So like what I'm trying to figure out is when you bring up these numbers, trying to orient myself to understand how to think about, you're like, hey, these are the different numbers. It's like, okay, what does that have? Like, I don't know enough about this, and it sounds like there are enough disparities that it's like comparing them doesn't really offer me a great vantage point.
Well, for instance, like Eagle has its own library, right?
Sure.
Okay. And now off the top of my head, what's the budget for that library? I don't know, but it's certainly not, 4 point whatever million. It's part of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I understand.
And they service 33,000 people. So,
but they have just one library?
Just one library. So comparatively speaking, right, you have one building that services 33,000 people, right? The population.
Yeah, but Mike, we're never going to be able to do it right. First off, we don't even know what the value is, right? So like, I'm trying to get like things that we can determine, we can actually lean on to make a determination that's justifiable.
Right.
So if we don't know what the numbers are, I don't think it's really like, I don't know that there's a lot of value to be like, well, like let's compare these two, even though we acknowledge we can't even compare it because we don't know what the financials are.
Right.
Okay, so like,
but from a 30,000, like I said, going back to what I said, from a 30,000 foot perspective, why is this library that has 5 buildings and has a couple hundred employees and has a book collection, why is it so much more than the operating costs of one of our smaller, actually probably more medium-sized cities in the county? So that's the motivation of getting on this, is digging into it. And just haven't been able to dig into it from an outsider perspective. It's like, here's the number. And the other part of it is also, we have to pay our property taxes, right? Yeah. You can't get around it. You can't say, well, gee whiz, I don't really go to the library, right? And a lot of people don't. I guarantee you there's probably people who never step foot into that library, but they still have to pay for it. It's like, okay, is that fair? Is it for the greater good? So that's a whole other discussion.
Well, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I want the city, if I live in Meridian or whatever city, it's the city's job, right, to keep me safe, security, right?
Sure.
Fire, sewer, water, trash, police, maybe some ancillary services like, Eagle's got a library. Star doesn't, but there's a library in Star that's part of the Ada Free Library District, right? So, okay, well, if I don't use the library, well, should it be an option for me to pay that money or not pay that money? I don't know. That's another discussion. Right?
Well, I'm trying to have that discussion with you.
Right. Okay.
So you're running for the library district.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, if there's a possibility of doing it from a legislative perspective, I think people should be given the option, right, to whether they want to. Do you utilize the library? Well, if you do, great. Then you pay for it. If you don't, then, maybe you don't pay for it. So that's my opinion,
sure.
Right? Is if you don't use it, right, you have to have fire, you have to have police. Even though you don't use it, I want it, right? And those are absolute necessities, right? Does a city absolutely need a library? Yeah, it's a good thing to have, right?
Right. Good thing's different than absolutely need it.
Right. Yeah, I have to pay? Do I want to pay for it? Maybe I do, maybe I don't, right? And, I mean, should we give people the option? Yeah, maybe. But, it's...
You keep saying maybe.
Yeah.
I'm never going to get your position.
But it's hard-coded but right now, I got to pay, no matter what.
But I'm not asking you what the current legislation is. I'm saying, look, you're running to be the trustee of the library district. And is your position... And I'm really just trying to understand. You could say, no, that's not my position. But it sounds like what you're saying is, hey, look, the people that utilize the library should be the ones responsible for paying for it, like physically utilize it. And the people that don't physically utilize it should have the option to not pay for it.
Right.
And there's, okay, great. Like that's a position. Great. Understood.
My position. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. So essentially pay to play is a piece of it. Financial transparency.
Yeah.
Understood. And again, I totally get what you're saying. You're having a hard time getting numbers. Makes complete sense. I would have the same questions. What else?
So I don't know if this is something that, Jeff talked about or not, but, and I don't know if you're aware, but There was
assume I'm not aware, because like this is all of these conversations.
Okay,
It's like,
let's
holy cow.
assume that you're not aware.
You know what? Can I tell you something? I just found out today that the Ada County Free Library District and the Meridian Library District don't overlap. I thought that everybody. I was like, okay, so we have a Meridian Library District, great, and then layered on top of that is the Ada County Library District. And they're like, no. They're like jigsaw puzzles, right? So they fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
It's like, so look, you gotta treat me like I'm 5. Like I'm piecing it all together one bit at a time.
Right.
Anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted you, Jeff. You don't know if Jeff told me, but
so back in February of this year, right, there was an incident where the Meridian Library's got this bookmobile thing, right? I don't know how many they have, maybe it's 2 or 3 or whatever, but they deliver books to people who are in their homes who can't get out. Fantastic. To nursing homes.
Sure.
Great. They also go to schools, right? And as you well know, there's schools in Ada County that are charter schools, right? There's private schools that maybe they don't have a library. Yeah. So these bookmobiles can go to different libraries.
Sure.
Well, so back in February, there was an incident at this charter school called Doral Academy, which is elementary through 6 or 8 or something like that, right? Where the bookmobile showed up. And, these 4th graders, 9-year-olds, he got on the bookmobile, and there were no other adults on the bookmobile except for the librarian / bookmobile driver. So they were, as in talking to the moms of these kids, well, the librarian on the bookmobile was like, here, take these books.
And
right?
you were talking to the moms.
I'm talking directly to the moms.
Gotcha.
I've talked to a couple of the moms.
Gotcha.
So the kids take the books back to the, into the classroom, and the teacher sees these books. Is like, well, wait a minute. Don't take these books home. I think there was maybe 8-10 books, and out of all the books, she kind of took all but one of them, right? She took them home, read them, and determined that these books were not appropriate for these kids. Not age appropriate. The teacher,
gotcha.
Yes. An educated, professional, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So she emailed the moms and said, hey, your daughter or your son took these books out, and I don't think it's appropriate. And the moms are looking at the books and going, yeah, you're right. So then they got a hold of the principal, and the principal said, yeah, these are not appropriate. So the principal basically emailed the library and said, yeah, you know what? We just don't want your bookmobile coming here anymore, right? So it's like, so one of the moms actually got pretty angry and went to the library and said, hey, your librarian gave suggested this book to my kid. I don't think it's appropriate. So what's going on here? Can I talk to this person? And they were like, well, no, we heard about it. We're trying to fix the problem. But at the end of the day, we can't stop kids from, the children's access to books. And the mom's like, well, no, this person on this bookmobile, right, gave them this book, and it's pretty egregious stuff.
Do you know the title of this book?
Oh, well, there's hold on. There's a bunch of them.
Bunch of them from this particular incident?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, here's one of them. The white guy dies first, right? Okay. Let's see what else.
And did you read The White Guy Dies First?
One of the moms, all the moms have gone through these books. The teacher's gone through these books, and they've determined that there's a lot of subject matter in these books that are not appropriate for a 4th grader, right? Now, have I personally gone through these books? I've skimmed through some of them, but I'm gonna defer to if you have a mom who's got a 4th grader and she goes through this book and says, yeah, my kid really doesn't want to read about cannibalism or murder or, masturbation or, sex between same sex or whatever. I don't think these books are appropriate for my children, right? And
well, I believe the state would agree if that's what's going on,
right?
Obviously, 710 outlined that very, very clearly.
Okay.
So, are you saying that that's what was in these books? That there was homosexual intercourse?
Well, I don't know.
Or cannibalism.
Yeah. Well, I know one of these books is a bunch of short stories. I think this one has cannibalism in it. Right. It's 13 short stories, and there's actually a few more books, and I have a list. But
so not the sex thing. That's just a side note. Like that's not something that you confirmed wasn't like I could understand.
Yeah.
I was actually.
Do you remember
that?
Now I've skimmed through this book, right? How to Love, and there is stuff in here about sexual relationships that.
How do you mean?
Well, between individuals, it talks in a very cute way, right, about sexual relationships between individuals.
When you say sexual relationships, I'm trying to understand, is it literally talking about physical sex, or is it saying that like Jack loved Brian?
Well, I think they do it in a kind of a cute way, right?
But when they do it, what's it?
Well, they talk about sexual relationships between individuals, okay? Where a mom has gone through this book and said, yeah, this is stuff that I want to talk to my kids about. Sure. I don't want somebody from a bookmobile to, give my kids this book. This is not appropriate. I'm
with you. Yeah.
Right,
I feel very similarly. There are things that I have 3 boys. I don't have girls, but I have 3 boys. And there are absolutely things that I want to talk to them about. And I do recognize also that there are varying degrees of desire to participate and moderate content amongst different parents. That's why Bill 710 went to such great lengths to say, hey, these are the things that we're gonna bring up. These are the things that you can't do. And if you feel that these books did any of these things, you absolutely can file a grievance. Now, again, even within a book that's acceptable, I would imagine there's a spectrum of people where maybe I'd be like, hey, I understand the state thinks this is acceptable, which, obviously applies to this library district, but I still want to talk to my kid about this. And what I'm trying to figure out is, are these books breaking state law, or are they books that people just say, hey, look, I still just want to talk to my kid about this?
Well, okay. And that's probably a conversation that you should have with these moms who, I would be more than happy to.
Mike, you're running for the library trustee. That's what I'm talking to you about.
Okay. And I understand that, right? So for my conversation with the moms, they felt that, yes, this broached, content, sexual content and other content that they felt was inappropriate for 4-year-olds or for fourth graders. Okay. To the point where, they contacted the principal, and even the teacher said, yeah, these are not appropriate books for kids.
Yeah, right? I got you.
Okay. All right. Now, as far as 710 goes, right, the way 710 works is that, okay, if you've got a problem with the book, right, that's available to, in the kids section or in teen section, well, first you have to go through the library's reconsideration process.
Yes.
Right.
Got to fill out a form, establish that you live in the district, that you have a minor in the district.
Now the form for, there's certain libraries out there where the form's a couple pages. For the Meridian Library District is 16 pages, right? It's like a dissertation. I don't remember the last time I filled out a 16-page form, right? Maybe it was college or something like that. So I think actually one of the moms went in and, filled out a reconsideration form. And, the Meridian Library District, first it goes to the director, and he decides, well, yes or no, right? And
he makes it a recommendation.
Right. Yeah. And he, says no. Well, then your next level of recourse is you can go to the board, right? Well, the board also can say no. All right, then what's the next thing? Well, then the next thing is you can write a letter that says, hey, I don't feel that this is appropriate, right? And I'm sending you this letter, and you need to actually move it from, the kids accessible shelf to the, parent shelf where the parent can, review it and determine if they want to give it to the kid. Not removing it from the library, not whatever, right? And if they don't do it within 60 days and it's still there, well, then you have recourse to, go to the prosecuting attorney of the district or go to the AG, and that's that. That's the process of 710, right? So are the moms going to go through that process? I don't know, right? But it was...
Well, apparently they didn't.
Well, not at this point, right?
Right. And they could.
They still could. So... But, to them, it was upsetting enough to say, this is a problem, right? Why is this going on, right?
Yeah.
So that's, and this has happened before. And that's why there is a 710, because even prior to 710, there were 2 other iterations of the bill that, I was involved with, right? And it was a process. And finally we get to this. And, here we are. So,
and this is, I'm glad you said that, because this is one thing you're like, this is why we have 710.
Right.
And that's right. So like 710 is the thing that addresses this exact situation.
Right.
Right. So like what I think is actually interesting about it, it's like, well, presumably based on 710, it doesn't really matter who the trustee is. It doesn't matter who the board is, because there's going to be a state level determination. So 710 conclusively addresses this entire problem that you've just articulated.
Well, yes, if you want to go through the process.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now, a lot of libraries, across the state, have already prepared themselves for 710, where they, well, here's some books. Let's move them, and so we don't run into this issue.
Right.
Well, the Meridian Library District, I think their position is, you got to come in and you got to go through the process, which is fine. I mean, that's what you got to do.
Wait, you're saying they haven't in a public forum been like, hey, we don't care about 710. You're going to have to go through this process. No, you're saying they're just, you feel that their position is they're like, hey, we are open to people challenging books, and you can come challenge books.
Right.
And you also feel that other libraries throughout the state have
been more proactive.
Great. So like, and how do we know that? Like, what do you mean?
So like, for instance, okay, so here's,
it doesn't matter, because it all depends on the communities anyway. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It's like, because obviously the challenges are going to be brought from communities. You're going to have more conservative, you're going to have more liberal. It's irrelevant. Right. Like, it doesn't matter. So bottom line is we have 710 in place, and Meridian Library is not, dissuading anybody from filing grievances, and go file grievances.
No, right.
So like, did you file grievances then?
Do I file grievances?
No. Well, what I'm wondering, what's interesting to me about 710 is it's like anybody can do this. Like I was telling, I had Phil Reynolds, right? And he's concerned about the same thing, which I agree with. And I have a lot of problems with the library books that are available in my former state, and again, that's not this state, so it is irrelevant now. But there were real problems where it's like, okay, I totally understand the sentiment here, which is like, you want to have appropriate books in the hands of minors. And especially if you're recommending them, assigning them to people, making assignments around the books, like, let's be really clear. And again, I think that's all important. But then the bigger question is, okay, knowing that that's the system in place, is there currently a problem that warrants you just saying like, hey, I'm a library, patron, and I don't think this book is great. And like, why not go through that process?
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's another book. All right. This is an interesting book. It's called Let's Talk About It. Okay.
Now, is this one currently available to like 4-year-olds in the Meridian Library?
This book I picked up the other day at the Orchard Park Library in the teen section.
Okay.
Right?
And you feel that I presume you're bringing it up because you feel that this should not be in the teen section, but instead of the adult section.
Well, it should be in an adult section, or a section where, the parent needs to look at it, and to
something not not somebody who's 17.
Right. And I mean, I walked in, I took a video of myself, and I've seen this book before, and I've seen it, honestly, I really don't like to look at these books because it's, it's like,
I could name several I don't want to look at.
But, this is a book that how old are you kids?
My oldest is 13.
Okay. So, I mean, look, teenagers, they have access to all kinds of insane stuff, whether you give it to them,
or the school gives it to them,
or their buddies, whatever. Right. Okay.
The school administered Chromebooks, the amount of pornography watched on those school administered Chromebooks, quite substantial. And here we're talking about books, but if you really want to worry about what the state is handing out to your kids, you should look at their school Chromebook.
But here's a book about, and I've dog-eared pages in there, and it's got graphic pictures of anal sex and, masturbation. And even there's a section that says, hey, if you want to investigate, sexuality, great way to do it is get on the internet and go to a porn site. Right. And you should pay for it because that's the right thing to do. It's in here. It's in this book, and it's available for teenagers. And from my perspective, I wouldn't let I let my 23-year-old daughter look through this book and said, yeah, yikes, this is pretty gruesome stuff. I say, yeah, it's for teens. So this should really.
Why not file a grievance and get you seem very concerned about two specific things, which I appreciate: content moderation and financial transparency. Both of these things I love.
The real question is how did this end up on the collection policy? You know, how did this end up being brought in? That's my bigger question is, okay, they have this policy and it's supposed to be balanced, but and I've talked to parents who've walked in and it's like, yeah, there seems to be a lot of books that are focused on.
May I? I've never seen this.
Oh yeah, here.
Thank you.
Go take
a
look.
Continue talking, please.
Go to the earmarked pages.
Okay.
And those are just certain pages, but in general, the book is, I wouldn't give that to my teenager. Right. So, I've talked to a lot of parents who are like, well, there seems to be a lot of stuff about this stuff and, pushing a certain, white guys die first and so on and so forth. So that's the other part of it is I just want to make sure it's a balanced collection policy that clearly reflects the community itself. Right. And I know that there's a lot of people are asleep. Right. A lot of people who don't go to the library, right. Who just, don't care. Right. But, in general, I think if you show that book and some of these other books to just the average Meridian individual, adult parent, they'd look at it and go, oh, yeah, is this in the library? I'm like, oh, yeah, it is. And so guess what? You're paying for it. So,
and again, I get what you're saying. Mm-hmm. What I'm wondering is where if you're saying it should reflect the community, it seems
just as a side note, there is a parent that has put in for reconsideration of that book, and was like, sorry, we're just going to keep it on the shelf. So
keep it on the shelf where it was.
Yeah. So now the next step is, okay, well, we got to go to write you a letter and wait 60 days. And then we got to go talk to the prosecuting attorney or the AG or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Right? So,
email Jan Bennett.
Yeah.
The Ada County prosecutor.
Good luck.
Yeah. Why is she?
Well, I mean, if you're trying to track down, people who are bringing in fentanyl and, all this other stuff, right? I mean, obviously her resources are limited. Well, is she really focused on that? Well, maybe she is, maybe she's not, right? But that is...
Mike, you keep saying that. Maybe yes, maybe... Yeah. What I want to know is, has Jan Bennett ever neglected to respond to an email regarding a library challenge?
I have never sent her an email regarding a library
challenge.
Great.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So bottom line is again, I'm with you, but what I'm trying to understand is whether or not I like this book. And first off, I don't live in Meridian, so my opinion about what the Meridian Library District has is absolutely irrelevant.
Right.
But I do appreciate your sentiment that, hey, this collection should reflect the community.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important in every community. And I also think it's important that there's a mechanism to persuade that reflection, which is like, hey, can anybody call in or anybody just fill out the form and be like, hey, I do not like this book. And if you're saying only one person has done that and the board was like, no, we actually... we don't think this actually breaks 710. If only one person has done it and it's not like this mass movement, then it's like, maybe it does reflect the community. I don't know, but that's what I'm keep trying to find out.
Well,
we have 710. It does work. We understand what the mechanism is. I've talked about it at length with every single candidate because obviously 710 affects every single library. And it's like, okay, so people can do it. They can do it if they want to. And at that point, my opinion, especially my opinion, even if I'm like, hey, I don't really want to ever touch that book again. I don't live in Meridian, and I'm not a Meridian, library district payer. And if the Meridian Library District wants this stuff, the patrons, then they don't have to do anything. And if they don't want it, then it's very clear what they can do. And people could avail themselves of that option. So my question is how do we know that this doesn't, aside from people's inaction, how do we know that this doesn't reflect what Meridian library goers want?
Well, the better question is,
well, hang on. That's a pretty good question.
Hold on.
That's a pretty good question.
I understand. But the better question is, why is there 710 to begin with? Right?
That's not a good question
about
the library district.
Yes, there is.
Wait, then let's get to that question. Mm-hmm. What I'm wondering is, how do we know this doesn't reflect the library goers of Meridian?
Because I will tell you that most people just don't pay attention. They don't know. Right.
Okay, but that just means that they don't know. That doesn't mean it doesn't reflect their interest.
No, that doesn't. I think if people knew what was going, the type of material that was there, and sometimes it's on social media, sometimes on the news, but I think people just don't pay attention because they're busy with other stuff. They're busy with, feeding their kids, the mortgage, that whole.
I do not disagree that people are doing a lot of other things, but a lack of awareness is not an agreement with a position.
Right. But there is a lack of awareness. And I think
that's true. But how do we know that lack of awareness correlates to a disagreement?
I think that if you showed these books just to the average guy on the street, and that's my opinion, right? If you showed these books to the average guy on the street, says, hey, should kids be, have access to this? I think most people would say no.
Mike, why don't you and I then go file a grievance?
Well, somebody's already filed a grievance with that.
I don't know. Why don't we get a hold of Jan Bennett's and it's like, I can't do it because I don't live in Meridian. And if you feel that
and somebody is going through the process on this book, right? And when they get to the point, they'll send a letter to Jan Bennett's, and if Jan Bennett's doesn't respond, then
I thought the library district had already determined that it was fine.
The library district has determined that this is fine.
So the person's no longer going through the process.
Next step. Right. If the library says that it's fine, that individual still has the ability to send the library a letter that says, hey, because of these reasons, right? Yeah. And you look at this book and it's like, okay, all you got to do is look at the pictures. Because of these reasons, I think that this book should be in this section where it's not, accessible
by minors.
And I'd like you to move it within 60 days. And if they don't, well, then the next step is to go refer that to the Jan Bennett's and the Raul Labradors of the world. So it's a process, right? So they're in the middle of that process. So we'll see what happens.
So what I'm trying to figure out from this is, did this recently happen? Like, did they make the determination like last week and they're like, okay, I'm going to write the letter?
Like I think at a couple of library board meetings ago. So
it's all on record. It was like, for sure. I believe. So it's theoretically possible, even though it might've been like several months ago, it's theoretically possible that since the determination 3 months ago, the person is still waiting to write the letter and they're like, they may be writing, they may or they may not be writing.
They may or may not. It's
so they may or
up to them.
Okay.
Right?
So we don't know if they're actually in the middle of the process then, because they may or may not.
Well, there's no time limit on the process.
Gotcha.
Right?
I get it. So by saying they're in the middle of it, they engaged it, whether or not they never take the next step, it's still labeled as
purely up to them.
Gotcha. So. Okay. So content moderation, appreciate your positions. Content moderation, transparency. Is there anything else for you in the library?
That's really the two main issues those
are big ones.
The transparency and, looking at the content. I'd like to see an analysis of the content, and I don't think I'm going to get that until I'm on the board. So, and then, on top of that, I want to get a better understanding of how, so we have this, I spout out about this $9.6 million. It's like, well, gee, Mike, do you know how the library works? Well, other than 5 buildings, books, and 3D printing.
200 employees.
No, right? So my job in the first 60 days is to go in and, well, let's talk to the people that work there, figure out what they do,
What if you did like a Doge thing? Like, you have 48 hours to write me what do you do? Get the Bobs to go in and sit down?
I'm just going to wear a wig and go in and say, hey, Sonny, Anyway, no.
And they have roughly 200 employees? Something like that?
I'm guessing. I mean, if they've got 5 libraries and, part-time people, full-time people, I think that, well, they used to have their main office, the management director that used to be at the Cherry Lane Library. Now I think they actually have a separate, office that they rent, or they lease for, the management staff.
Yeah.
So I'm just guessing that there's 200 people. I mean, I look at the personnel expenditures and, do a little quick math. It's like, okay, well, this makes sense.
Well, it would be at least $5 million just in personnel then, right? Because it's like $25,000 per person for 200 people. And like part-time and then retirements and then healthcare, you're at least at $5 million of your $9 million budget. And then you have then you have, 5 physical locations.
Yeah.
So then you're in it, probably at least another $1.5 million to 2 just maintenance, like a roof and landscaping and everything. So you're getting to the 9 million pretty fast there. If you just have 200 employees at 25,000 gross compensation, plus, obviously, I've always paid self-employment tax. So you got to pay that. Yeah. So you get there. It seems like you'd get there pretty fast at 200 employees. If you said it was 50 employees, I'd be like, whoa, everybody's making $100,000.
Like I said, I don't, I'm just guessing that it's 200 employees. It could be less, it could be more.
Yeah.
And what is the appropriate number? I know, for a few years ago, we kind of looked into, they were advertising for 3 HR specialists. It's like, well, okay, well,
what was the salary?
I don't remember.
Damn it, Mike, come on.
I had an HR person that
I want hard numbers, man.
I had an HR person who was looking into this. She goes, yeah, they're hiring 3 HR people, HR specialists. Is like, why do they have 3 HR people for, this library that in theory doesn't really employ that many people, right? I mean, so that's, that's a whole other, that was a whole other, rabbit hole. But
are those people that are predominantly trying to advertise things like and communicate with the community over specific programs like the summer literacy programs or the availability of the sensory room for people on the autism spectrum, or, like we have telemedicine pods. Like somebody hit me up the other day because she knew I was doing library interviews, and she said, "Hey, ask about that pod." I was like, "What the hell's the pod?" Right. And it turns out it was one of the telehealth pods. Right. And so here's this thing she noticed, but she didn't know what it was. And obviously if the community doesn't know it's there, they're not going to utilize it. So are the PR people designed to like help the community understand what the offerings are of the district?
I would assume, is there a PR person? I would think there might be, and I noticed the pod too. I don't know if you've been to the,
I have not.
Okay. There's one on right by the Winco off of Shinden and Linder. But yeah, as soon as you walk into the right, there's this pod there, and it's not available to the public yet. And I said, hey, what's
the pod?
What's the pod for? Oh, it's I think somebody wrote a grant. They got the grant, and I believe it's some kind of, I don't know, telehealth kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
Telehealth.
Like, okay.
Because so much of we have a dump truck of medicine now going.
Right. So, well, that's nice, right? When I was a kid, I go to the library, it's like, okay, you go, you pick books out and you sit there and read. So now we have all these expanded services. So the question is, all right, well, should we be in all these different things? I don't know, right? And is that why we have $9.6 million budget? Because we're trying to find things to spend money on, right? I mean, this is opposite world versus a business, right? Business, I got to go find revenue, right? And I'm going to maximize my revenue, and I want to minimize my expenses so I can have that much profit. Well, this is like, I always know that I can increase my revenue by at least 3% a year, right? It's a guarantee because it's written in the code. People have to pay that money. I can you can go, it's 3% on existing homes, and then I think it's 5% on new construction.
Plus, I think you can get a 1%.
Yeah, there's foregone and whatever, blah, 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 blah. And now, like cities like Meridian, they're pretty tight on their budget. They're like, it's like, okay, here's the basic stuff. And, people are like, battling over budgets. In this situation, it's like, okay, we can always, get the 3%. And they do. I looked at the last few years and it's like actually more than 3%.
Now, the last 3 years, 3% is actually a decrease in budget when you factor in inflation.
Yeah, if you want to look at it that way.
So they're actually taking less money.
Well, yeah, and I'd have to look back at the numbers, but yeah, they're taking their 3%. And yes, right, when there's inflation, okay, is 3% going to cover it? Well, maybe not, right?
Well,
probably
definitely
not.
No.
Right, definitely not. So the point I'm trying to make is, all right, so they're taking this money. Is it a case of looking for places to spend the money? Because if we don't spend it, because, right, government agencies, if we don't spend it, then we're not going to get another, we're not going to get over and above that, right? If we try to save them money, they're going to go, well, you guys can survive on this. Why are you asking for more, right? Which is what happened with, JFAC and all that. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with that situation where they've separated at the state level, right? Everybody's got to go to this joint financial appropriations committee and say, we need this money, right? Well, they separated that from the maintenance budgets and then enhanced budgets. Well, okay, you can have your maintenance, right? Because you're paying for the same stuff, but why do you want this extra stuff, right? So I think in the case of the Meridian Library District, is that how it works? I don't know. I've got to get on the board to figure that out. But they can take extra money every year. So is it a case of, well, we're just barely covering costs, or is it, hey, we got to go find places to spend this money. Otherwise, we're not going to get it, but they're going to get it anyway because they're on the board.
So, gotcha. And you're saying you don't know if that's the case.
I don't know if that's the case. Right. So,
which could I mean, I understand. I actually understand this very deeply. I have a brother who went to an Ivy League school, and I was like 23, and he was like, "Hey, do you need a computer?" Mm-hmm. Now, look, I was not rolling at 23, but I had a computer. Right. I was like, I mean, no, but sure. Like, what do you mean? He was like, well, I got to get a new laptop, and he was going to like this really high end. And he was going to Princeton, and he had this laptop that he showed me the year before that he got with like a remote on it and everything. I was like, why do you have a remote for your laptop? He's like, well, I had to get the media version. Anyway, the point is, he goes through this whole thing. He's like, well, we have a grant every year for
got to spend it.
This, right? So we have to spend it. And he ended up giving the laptop that was a year old with the remote to my brother-in-law, which is fine, like, because I didn't need it. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, that seems great. So I understand that exists at some level somewhere with grant funding, right? What I've tried to parse out since understanding that actually exists, that it's not like a conspiracy. And again, I was like 23 when I had that experience. What I've tried to parse out is like, okay, is that true for every single agency anywhere that's government run? Is it true everywhere that they're always spending money? They're always flush with money. They always have more than they need. And they're always trying to run around to just use it or they lose it. And I have not found that, like, I don't have any reason to believe that is the case, right? Like, in that, what you're articulating is something that I hear all the time, which is like, well, they got to spend the money or they lose it. It's like, how do we know that? And nobody, like, very rarely does anybody bring like hey, my brother with a computer example. It's like, well, they could be doing it. It's like, yeah, but they could be not. And we can say they could be doing about every single city, state, national organization ever, anywhere, anytime. So it's like the most universal criticism or consideration, financial consideration ever. Right. But it's like, well, because it exists for everyone, it's kind of like an irrelevant consideration for me. Because it's like, well, you say that about or not you, but like people could say that about anything. So it's like, why even pay attention to that anymore?
Right. Well, elect me to the board and I'll find out for you.
Oh my God,
right?
Look at you. I feel like we should go down right now. You and I should go down and we should get a copy of the budget. How about this? If I can get a copy of the budget before the election, I will put it on Instagram and I will share it with you. If I could find a way to do this, how much did you say was?
To get it? 9.6 million.
No. How much did you say the FOIA request is?
Oh, I've got a copy of the budget, but it's all high level, right? This is what we spent on personnel for 2024.
How much did they spend on personnel?
I think it was like, it might have been a little over 5 million, right?
Okay, wait, so you know how much they spent on personnel?
Well, I know how much, but how many people do you employ? What do they get paid, right? Here's your I spent $800 million on I'm just pulling that number.
That's a large number.
I spent $800,000 on operating costs for this past year. One big number. Well, what was it for? Was it utilities? Sure. Was it, coffee? Well, what was
janitorial
it?
Services,
landscaping. I mean,
roof maintenance, paint.
A few years ago, I went through a process I was looking at buying a business, right?
Sure.
And you go through and you go, all right, well, let's dig in.
Yeah.
Right. All right. What's this for? What's that for? Why is this so much more than, oh, well, we put that in because, that's for my RV. Right. So you got to pull that out. Oh, okay. So the value of your business goes down. So that's the granularity that I'm looking for is like, what did you spend the money on? Right. What was, and are we spending it in the right place? And like I said, we might come out at the other end of this process and say, yeah, it all makes sense. It costs this much to run this library because you're getting this, and this. Right. Now, do you want all that? Yes or no? Well, do you care? Right? So I can't do all that until I get on the board because, you ask for this information and you sometimes get it and you sometimes don't because they're busy, right? Putting the books in the shelves, ordering books, whatever they do. I actually just thought about this. I have a dear friend of mine, this guy Drew, and the fact that he's a dear friend, you don't have to consider that. But I got a guy, my buddy Drew, and he grew up in Ketchum. He grew up broke, and as he puts it, his parents were not,
a lot of people struggle. Anyway, so Drew was like a latchkey kid.
Yeah.
And again, not growing up in great situation. And he said that going to the library was one of like the things that really got him out of it. He ended up going on to getting advanced degrees, very successful businessman, all of these things. And his capacity to engage the library, get out of his house, be introduced to books, be introduced to knowledge and all of these things, it was integral in his development and his capacity to leave his poor circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about people paying for it, only getting access if they're paying for it, would we set up like a scholarship for kids like Drew? Like, is there room for people who can't pay for it? Because by the way, like when I was in high school, I was on a summer rec team. I had to pay for the summer rec team out of my paper route money, right? Like I did not have a lot of money. Like I would buy my own clothes and food a lot of time. So I didn't have a lot. And if the knowledge of the world was gatekept by a tuition expense, I likely would not have engaged with it at all. So like, how do we operate with those kids?
That's an interesting question. From a taxpayer perspective, right? Because anybody could walk into that library, whether you live in Meridian or Boise or wherever. Now, I'm not saying that, hey, you know what? The kid from Boise can't use the Meridian Library.
And just like park systems, right? Yeah, right.
Whether or not I pay for it or I don't pay for it, I'm not saying that I want to stop that kid from coming in.
Sure.
Right. Because when like last night, we had this forum and I said, hey, how many of you people in this room are taxpayers or pay property tax in the city of Meridian? Maybe 50%. Okay. So there's another 50% that, well, they enjoy the use of this library because, it's like, wouldn't want to say it's like the sewer or the water, but it's a very nice to have. We've always had libraries, right?
And they presumably pay the property tax through their rent payments. I presume you're saying that they're renters and not homeowners.
Well, or they live in a different city, or maybe they are renters, right? And they pay rent to this landlord that he ultimately pays. So in one way, shape, or form, you're paying.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So then the question is, all right, if you make it an option, like you said, in your situation, do you let these kids in? I say, yeah, you do, right? But I still think property owners, potentially should have, well, I don't use the library. I'm not going to stop that guy, but, I don't want to cut my check every year for it because I don't use it. And how do they manage that? Well, it's up to the library to do that. Now, this might be whole pie in the sky, right? But
you can have a target to hit, right? If that's a goal.
Right. Is it even doable? Who knows, right? I don't know. I'm sure that, maybe there'll be folks with pitchforks and, torches.
God, I hope not.
Coming down the street to my house and, whatever, right?
Listen to me. No matter what, we got to get away from that.
Right.
Like, I can love your idea, I can hate your idea, but this is part of the political process, and we need people to feel like they can run, have their positions. If their positions are, popular amongst the people, God bless it. If their positions are not popular amongst people, God bless it. But we need to get away from people coming after individuals who go through the process of civic engagement and attempting to have their position heard and see if the rest of the community agrees. It's like, and if my baby's ugly, my baby's ugly. Like, all right, man, you got me. But if it's not and people like it, okay, great. But either way, like dissuading people or getting mad at them is not the way we move Idaho forward. We move Idaho forward by allowing people to, in good faith, run and have their positions heard. And that's the competition of ideas. That's the free market of ideas. And that's how we all win at the end. So, man, Mike, what a conversation we've had here.
Well, and here's a side note, because I was thinking about that as you were going through your diatribe there.
I feel very passionately about that.
But okay, we passed this. It's not really school voucher. It's a credit, right?
Sure.
I want to take my kids out of the government school and put them in a private school, and I get the credit for that. Okay.
Well, the credit goes directly to to the
on the taxes, right?
Yeah, what's so funny is like they're not a voucher. It's like, well, what is it? It's like, well, you got to pay the money, and then we reimburse you the money. It's like, okay, so the only difference between this and voucher is the money goes from you to the it passes. Yeah. Right. Oh, anyway, school choice.
School choice. So, well, gee whiz. I mean, could you do something with similar to library? Well, is library choice. It's like, well, I'm not interested in funding this library. So, okay, I don't get to use it, right? Which is unfortunate because it's not just the Meridian Library, but you have this whole system.
Yeah.
So, okay, and you decide, I don't care. I don't leave my house anyway. I just watch TV, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to fund it. Okay, so do you get a credit back? I don't know. That's a possibility. There are actually some taxing districts where you can, I think in Ada County, I can't remember exactly which one it was, where you can opt in or you can opt out, and you don't get the service if you opt out. So anyway, is there a precedent? I don't know, but it's up for discussion. So, or may not go anywhere, or I may not get elected, but I hope I do. Right,
man. These are complex things. Mike, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming in today. Is there anything we've missed that you want to hit here at the end?
Yeah, just vote for me for Meridian Library District.
God bless you, sir. Vote for me.
It is a campaign, right? And I commit to, transparency, getting the information out to the taxpayers. And, at the end of the day, they might be doing a wonderful job and I may ask for more money. I don't know, right? We'll see. But we'll see on May 20th, right?
Indeed we will.
At 9 p.m. thereabouts.
9 p.m. Mike, thank you for coming in today. Thanks for running a campaign.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing what you're doing.
Right. All right.